Caroline Crouch, like many teenage girls, fantasized about being in love with someone who'd sweep her off her feet and carry her far from the everyday routines of school, chores, and teenage curfews. She wanted love, freedom, and the joy of building a future with someone who understood her soul. Her life took a different turn when she crossed paths with a pilot. Babish Anagnostopoulos was 27 years old at the time. It was love at first sight. He was confident, charming, and everything Caroline, just 15 at the time, thought she had been waiting for. Their story unfolded like a fairy tale. By the time Caroline turned 18, the two left for Portugal, and there they got married. Their relationship was definitely the type a lot people admired and wished they had, and was blessed with a beautiful girl. But looks can be deceptive. Behind the smiles and scenic photos was a truth darker than anyone could have imagined. What is the dark secret behind this picture-perfect relation? Let's find out. Welcome. This is Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so to stay updated on the latest crimes we uncover. Caroline Crouch was born on July 12, 2001, in Athens, Greece, to a multicultural family. Her father, David Crouch, a retired British engineer, and her mother, Susan Della Cuesta, a dedicated Filipina teacher, gave Caroline a loving and nurturing home. When she was just 8, the family relocated to the beautiful island of Alonissos, nestled in the Aegean Sea. That little island would become the backdrop of her childhood, filled with salty air, turquoise waters, and endless beach days. Caroline was vibrant, athletic, and intelligent. She adored the ocean, and over time, she became an avid scuba diver, drawn to the silence and mystery beneath the waves. She was strong in mind and body, and she wasn't the kind of girl who gave in easily. Then, one Friday in 2017, everything changed. During a school parade on the island, Caroline locked eyes with a man who would soon become the center of her world, Babish Anagnostopoulos, a charismatic helicopter pilot visiting the island. He was 27. She was just 15. From that moment on, their lives became intertwined. Despite the age gap, their relationship progressed quickly. To many, it seemed like young, impulsive love, a whirlwind that carried them across borders. When Caroline turned 18, she and Babish left Greece to Portugal, sealing their love in a quiet ceremony. They came back to Greece with fresh plans for their life together. Caroline enrolled in college in Athens. Babish continued working as a professional pilot. And soon, they welcomed a baby girl, their pride and joy. By all appearances, they were a golden couple. Smiling photos on social media painted the picture of a young family in love. Friends and followers swooned over their adventures and called them relationship goals. But even the brightest smiles can cast the darkest shadows. The couple purchased land just days before the tragedy, a piece of property meant for their dream home. Caroline's parents had generously gifted her 50,000 euros to help her begin this next chapter. Along with another 10,000 euros they saved, the young couple stashed away a life's worth of savings inside their home. In Greece, it wasn't uncommon to keep cash at home. Distrust in the banking system was widespread. Caroline and Babish believed they were being smart, safe, and cautious. What they didn't know was that someone else might have known about the money too. And just days after buying the land, in the early morning hours of May 11, 2021, the life they were building began to shatter. It was still dark outside, 4:30 a.m., May 11, 2021, when Babish claimed he was suddenly jolted awake by chaos inside their home. The family was living in a stone-built 2-story house in Glyconera, a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Athens. Caroline, Babish, and their 11-month-old daughter were supposed to be safe, but safety vanished that morning. According to Babish, 3 masked men had broken into their home, slipping in silently, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods. They carried guns, spoke with mixed Greek and Albanian accents, and wasted no time overpowering him. Before he could react, he said they beat him, bound his hands and feet, and taped over his eyes and mouth with duct tape, rendering him completely helpless. He couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He could only listen. In another room, Caroline, just 19 years old, was suddenly face to face with the nightmare. Their daughter slept nearby, oblivious to the storm unfolding around her. The intruders demanded money. Caroline pleaded, but she truly didn't know where all of it was hidden. Babish, overwhelmed by fear and the screams of his wife, finally caved. Muffled and panicked, he told them where they had stored their savings, the money meant for their new home. It was hidden inside a Monopoly board game box. The thieves emptied the box, stuffing the 10,000 euros in cash into their pockets. But they weren't done. They roamed through every room of the house, turning over drawers, tearing apart closets, and snatching jewelry and valuables. No space was spared. Still, something about their behavior didn't add up. The robbery had taken a sinister turn. Caroline was still begging them not to hurt their daughter when Babish heard a scream, one that chilled him to the bone. He couldn't see, but he could feel the room's energy change. He felt the rope around his neck tighten and passed out from the pressure. In those terrifying moments, the house fell into total silence. When Babish eventually came to, it was too late. The home was eerily quiet. The robbers were gone. But one sound pierced through the silence: the cries of their baby daughter. Still partially bound and unable to use his hands, Babish dragged himself to a cell phone, tapping at it with his nose until he finally dialed emergency services. But with duct tape still over his mouth, the call was nearly impossible to understand. The dispatcher on the other end struggled to make sense of his muffled words. It took another hour and a half before police and fire rescue arrived on the scene. What they found would send shockwaves through Greece. When emergency responders stepped into the home around 6 a.m., they weren't prepared for what they were about to see. The inside of the house was a disaster. Every room looked like it had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, clothes tossed across the floors, and furniture overturned. In the middle of the mess, officers spotted the Monopoly game box lying open, its contents gone, just like Babish had described. But then they noticed something far more disturbing. A security camera, once mounted on the wall, had been ripped off and thrown onto the couch. The memory card was missing. Just as the scene was beginning to settle in, an officer stepped back in horror. Hanging from the staircase was the family's puppy, Roxy, a white and brown husky barely 7 months old. She had been strangled with her own leash. There was no reason for the robbers to kill the dog. It hadn't attacked anyone. It was a cruel act, one that hinted at something far darker than a simple burglary. Then they found Babish, lying on the bedroom floor, his mouth and eyes taped shut, duct tape wrapped around his neck, and his hands and feet bound behind his back with rope. He was conscious, dazed, barely speaking, but alive. But Caroline wasn't. She was found on the bed, lying motionless with their baby daughter next to her. The infant had clearly been trying to wake her mother, clapping her hands and crying, not understanding what had happened. Caroline's face was pale. Her body is cold. She had been dead for hours. The rescuers quickly removed the tape and ropes from Babish. And when he saw Caroline's lifeless body, he screamed in anguish. To anyone watching, it looked like a grieving husband devastated beyond belief. He told police that 4 men had been involved, 3 inside, 1 keeping watch. He described the break-in in vivid detail. How one man had entered the basement through a window by removing the pins instead of smashing the glass. How they had killed the dog before letting the others in. How they had come straight for the master bedroom. It was all so precise. He even described the weapons: a silver Colt handgun and another black firearm. Detectives took down his statements and began examining the evidence. The attackers had taken the 10,000 euros in cash, along with about 20,000 euro worth of jewelry. There was only one piece of physical evidence left behind: a black hood, presumably dropped during the chaos. Based on Babish's account, authorities created a sketch of one suspect: a tall, dark-skinned, overweight man. The search for the killers began. But behind closed doors, investigators were already raising quiet questions. Since the thieves got what they wanted, what was the reason for silencing Caroline and the dog? But one thing was certain: this was not a random robbery. Someone knew about the cash in the house. Someone knew when to strike, and someone was willing to kill. From the moment the news broke, the entire nation was gripped by the horror of what happened to Caroline Crouch, a young mother, just 19, brutally murdered in her own bed, with her baby daughter at her side. The image was unbearable. The media painted her as a vibrant, loving woman whose life was stolen far too soon. The manhunt to catch her killers began immediately. Police poured resources into the investigation. They reviewed hours of CCTV footage from homes and businesses in the Glycanera neighborhood. Somewhere out there, the faces behind the masks had to be captured on tape. And in one frame, they caught something. A dark-colored car, followed by a motorcycle, was seen circling the area around the time of the alleged break-in. But the trail quickly went cold. No license plates, no visible faces. The police had no fingerprints, no DNA, no blood, and barely any physical clues. Whoever had done this, if it truly was an external attack, had been extremely careful. Still, they followed leads. Then, a few days after Caroline's funeral, a break came. A routine traffic stop near the Greek-Bulgarian border led to the arrest of a man traveling with a fake passport. The suspect, Georgi Karadeshvili, was a 43-year-old Georgian national with a long history of violent burglaries. He had been linked to 12 different break-ins over the past 6 months, including 2 that happened close to Caroline and Babiš's home. The sketch Babiš had given the police closely resembled Karadeshvili. Things looked promising. Police interrogated him for days, pressing him for any connection to the Glycanera case. He insisted he had never heard of Caroline Crouch. He was physically and mentally worn down, even allegedly beaten during questioning, but he wouldn't break. Eventually, the police had to admit they had nothing solid. No evidence to tie him to the scene. No DNA. No eyewitnesses. Nothing but a sketch which wasn't enough. Karadeshvili was released. And just like that, the case hit another wall. The pressure was mounting. The Greek government offered a €300,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Still, no one came forward. Investigators turned their attention to organized crime networks, particularly Albanian gangs known for professional burglaries. They compiled a list of suspects and showed Babiš photos of 10 men. He couldn't recognize any of them. And then came the questions no one wanted to ask. Was it really a burglary? The public started to wonder, was something else going on? All the facts, or rather the lack of them, just didn't add up. According to the neighbors, no noise from the house that night, no barking from the dog, no struggle anyone could hear, no DNA found by the investigators, no signs of forced entry. As the weeks passed with no arrests, detectives began revisiting every detail Babiš had given. And the deeper they looked, the more inconsistencies emerged. First, there was the basement window, the supposed entry point for the attackers. Babiš had claimed that a large man entered through it after removing the pins. But when investigators examined it closely, they noticed something odd. The window was extremely small. So small, in fact, that it would have been nearly impossible for a man of the size Babiš described to squeeze through. Then came the issue of the missing memory card from the security camera. Babiš said it had been taken by the robbers during the invasion. But forensic data from the security system revealed a surprising twist. The memory card had been removed at 1:20 a.m., nearly 3 hours before the break-in was said to have occurred. Why would the intruders remove the footage before they ever entered? And then, there was Caroline's smartwatch, a small device worn on her wrist to track health and activity. At 3:58 a.m., it showed she was likely asleep. At 4:05 a.m., her heart rate spiked sharply, a sign of sudden fear or physical stress. By 4:11 a.m., her heart rate had completely stopped. That meant Caroline had died before the time Babiš claimed the robbers broke in. The walls were beginning to close in. Investigators checked the health app on Babiš's own phone. While he said he had been completely tied up and unconscious during the break-in, the app showed he was moving around during that exact time frame. To confirm their suspicions, detectives conducted a test. They bound one of their own officers with duct tape over the mouth and had them attempt to call emergency services with their nose, just like Babiš claimed he did. The officer couldn't do it. The evidence, once scattered and uncertain, was now lining up in a clear, chilling direction. And then came the most damning detail of all. Investigators gained access to Caroline's phone, and what they found painted a completely different picture of the couple's relationship. Text messages, voice notes, and her personal diary revealed that Caroline was desperately unhappy. She had been trying to leave. On the night she died, Caroline had even attempted to book a hotel for herself and their daughter, a place to go to in order to get away from Babish. In one text to a friend, she confided, "I can't do this anymore." Her diary spoke of arguments, emotional control, and isolation. She had written that Babish didn't want her to work, that he kept her away from people, that he controlled her money, that he wanted her to be a full-time mother at just 19. She loved her daughter. She dreamed of giving her a better life, but she was trapped, and she was planning to escape. The illusion of a happy marriage, the one seen in carefully posed Instagram photos, was unraveling. And the police realized, if Caroline had tried to leave that night, someone had made sure she never would. June 17, 2021. Exactly 37 days after Caroline's death, Caroline's family and close friends gathered on the island of Alanissos for a small memorial service in her honor. The ceremony was quiet, filled with sorrow and whispered prayers. As mourners wept at her graveside, a police helicopter landed nearby. To the public, it looked like a show of support. But in truth, detectives were there for a very different reason. After the service, plainclothes officers approached Babish calmly. They told him that new information had come to light and asked if he would come with them to Athens to help the investigation. He agreed. He had no idea what was coming. Once in police custody, Babish was escorted into a quiet room. And there, investigators laid it all out: the timeline, the smartwatch data, the surveillance footage, and the inconsistencies in his story. For nearly 8 hours, they pressed him for answers. At first, Babish stuck to his version. A gang of masked men had invaded the house, stolen their money, killed his wife, and vanished. But the facts couldn't be denied anymore. Eventually, Babish broke. His confession came slowly, coldly. He told officers that the night of Caroline's death, they had gotten into a vicious argument. She had told him she was leaving. She was taking their baby, and she was done. According to him, she lashed out, hitting him and throwing their baby into the crib. That moment, he said, pushed him over the edge. His mind went blank. He sat on the bed beside her, placed a pillow over her face, and pressed down with his entire body until she stopped moving. He had just murdered his wife. Their 11-month-old daughter watched it happen from the crib. And then, in a calculated attempt to cover his tracks, Babish staged the entire break-in. He killed their dog Roxy and hanged her from the stairs to fake brutality. Ransacked the house, throwing clothes, furniture, and drawers into disarray. Removed the security camera's memory card hours before the act. Taped his own hands, mouth, and eyes, and lay on the bedroom floor. Called emergency services with his nose, mimicking the image of a surviving victim. It was cold, planned, methodical, and for over a month, he played the grieving widower, giving interviews, thanking police, posting tributes, even attending his wife's funeral as if he were broken. But it was all a lie. He believed the story he'd created was so perfect, no one would ever suspect him. But in the end, it was his own overconfidence and technology that brought the truth to light. The country that once mourned alongside Babish now watched in stunned silence as the truth came out. Public opinion turned overnight. How could a man who smiled for cameras, who cried in front of reporters, who held his daughter in his arms and spoke of grief, be the same man who had smothered his wife in cold blood? Babish Anagnostopoulos was charged with multiple offenses: murder committed in the heat of passion, obstruction of justice, filing a false police report, animal cruelty for the brutal killing of Roxy, giving false evidence. He stood trial in May 2022. His defense tried to soften the blow by painting it as a crime of passion, a moment of madness brought on by a heated argument. But prosecutors had no intention of letting him off lightly. This wasn't just about Caroline. It was about the elaborate lies, the public manipulation, and the premeditated cover-up that followed. Witnesses, Forensic experts and psychologists were brought in. The court listened to the painful details of the crime and read aloud the diary entries Caroline had written, painting the story of a young woman trapped in a relationship she was desperate to escape. In the end, justice caught up with Babish. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Caroline Crouch, plus an additional 11 years for killing their dog, and fined €21,000. He showed little emotion during sentencing. But for Caroline's family, no punishment could ever return what they lost. A daughter, a friend, a mother, a bright soul extinguished far too soon. Their daughter, now a toddler, was placed in the custody of Caroline's parents, the Crouch family, who vowed to raise her surrounded by love, far from the shadows of that violent night. And what about Babish? The man who once flew helicopters through the Greek skies now sits behind bars, grounded by the weight of his crime, forever remembered not as a husband or father, but as a man who chose to silence the woman he claimed to love. Caroline's story is a haunting reminder that appearances can lie, that even the most polished social media life can mask deep pain. She was young, hopeful, and trying to find a way out, but she never got the chance. To this day, people across Greece and the world speak her name, not just in sorrow, but in solidarity with women who find themselves in controlling or abusive relationships. Her story is not just a tragedy, it's a warning, a cry for awareness, and a call for justice. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this story shocking and heartbreaking, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. What do you think about Caroline's murder? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.